Nestled amidst the hustle and bustle of a thriving metropolis stood St. Augustine's Church, a timeless monument of faith and tradition. Its towering spires reached for the heavens, a stark contrast to the busy streets below. Inside, André, a young and devoted curate, moved about with purpose. His days were consumed by the sacred duties of the church, preparing for services, assisting the elderly, counseling the troubled, and organizing charity drives. Despite his tireless work, André never complained. He believed deeply that his purpose was to serve others, no matter how small or unnoticed his contributions might seem. André was a man of quiet faith and steadfast compassion. While many saw the world in shades of convenience or worthiness, André's vision was clear. Every soul mattered. It was a belief instilled in him since childhood, nurtured by stories of saints who had served the downtrodden and outcasts without hesitation. For André, compassion wasn't an obligation, it was a calling. Late one chilly autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline and painted the city in hues of amber and crimson, André locked the heavy oak doors of the church. The day's work was done, and the sanctuary was quiet, save for the faint flicker of candles near the altar. He stepped out into the brisk air, tugging his coat tighter against the wind, when he noticed something unusual. Across the cobblestone courtyard, near the wrought-iron gates of the church, sat a man. His shoulders slumped under the weight of a threadbare coat, his hair unkempt, and his face etched with weariness. Beside him lay a few belongings: a tattered blanket, a dented thermos, and a small cardboard sign that read, "Hungry, please help." André paused, his heart sinking. The man's presence was striking against the backdrop of the stately church and the bustling city. The streets were lined with well-dressed pedestrians, all hurrying past without so much as a glance in the man's direction. Some turned their heads away deliberately, while others muttered complaints about vagrants cluttering the neighborhood. For a moment, André hesitated. The church had clear rules about engagement with the homeless, particularly within its immediate vicinity. While St. Augustine's often organized formal outreach programs, clergy and staff were discouraged from informal interactions, a policy meant to maintain order and avoid conflicts with the city council. André understood the rationale, but it didn't make it any easier to walk away. That evening, André returned to his modest room within the church's quarters, but the image of the man lingered in his mind. He couldn't shake the thought of those weary eyes, or the quiet dignity with which the man had sat amidst the disdain of passers-by. He prayed for guidance, his heart torn between duty and compassion. The following night, André made a decision. After locking up the church, he stopped by the pantry. Carefully, he prepared a small package, a sandwich, an apple, and a bottle of water. Without a word, he walked to the gates where the man still sat, now shivering in the chill of the evening. André placed the package beside him, offered a warm smile, and walked away. This became a ritual. Night after night, André would leave a small offering of food and water for the man, who always accepted it with a nod of gratitude. They never exchanged words, but an unspoken bond began to form. André noticed how the man's eyes softened over time, as though the simple gesture had sparked a glimmer of hope in his otherwise bleak existence. As days turned into weeks, the man's presence near the church began to draw attention. Some residents of the affluent neighborhood started to complain, their voices growing louder and more insistent. Business owners argued that the man's presence deterred customers. Parents whispered concerns about safety. Rumors spread like wildfire, claims that the man was dangerous, that he was involved in theft or drugs, though no one had any evidence to support these accusations. One morning, André overheard a heated conversation just outside the church doors. A group of locals had gathered, their voices sharp with indignation. "We can't let this go on any longer," one man said, his face red with anger. "He's turning this place into a slum." Another woman chimed in, clutching her designer handbag. "I saw him digging through the trash yesterday. It's disgusting. What kind of example does that set for our kids? Andrei's heart sank. He wanted to speak up, to remind them of the church's mission to serve the least among them, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. The crowd wasn't looking for understanding. They wanted a solution that aligned with their convenience. The breaking point came one crisp Sunday morning. The congregation was gathered for the weekly service, and the choir's hymns echoed through the sanctuary. As the final notes faded, a commotion erupted outside. Andrei, sensing trouble, hurried to the doors. A mob had formed in the courtyard. The homeless man sat in his usual spot, but this time he was surrounded by angry residents. They shouted at him to leave, some even threatening to call the police. The man remained silent, his gaze fixed on the ground, as if bracing himself for the inevitable. Andrei felt his chest tighten. He couldn't stand by any longer. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, his clerical collar catching the morning light. "Please, everyone, calm down," Andrei called out, his voice firm but composed. The crowd turned to face him, their expressions a mix of surprise and defiance. "Andrei," one woman began, her tone exasperated, "this man doesn't belong here. He's a nuisance. You must do something." Andrei met her gaze, his voice steady but resolute. "This man is a child of God, just like each of us. He hasn't harmed anyone. If his presence is troubling, then let me take responsibility for him." The crowd murmured in disapproval, but Andrei stood his ground. Ignoring their protests, he approached the man and extended a hand. "Come with me," Andrei said gently. The man hesitated, his eyes searching Andrei's face for signs of sincerity. Finally, he accepted the offer. Andrei led him into the church, away from the hostile crowd, and into the warmth of the sanctuary. Inside, Andrei prepared a small room for the man. It wasn't much, just a cot, a blanket and a lamp, but it was safe and quiet. He brought the man a hot meal and sat with him, listening as he finally spoke. "Why are you doing this?" the man asked, his voice hoarse from days of silence. "Because it's the right thing to do," Andrei replied simply. "No one deserves to be treated the way they did out there." The man's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in weeks he smiled. A faint, fragile smile, but one that carried the weight of gratitude. The weeks passed, and the presence of the homeless man near the church became a sore point for the residents of the neighborhood. What had begun as quiet whispers among a few passers-by soon grew into a wave of collective frustration. For many, the man was an eyesore, a blemish on the otherwise pristine streets lined with boutique shops, cozy cafes, and well-maintained brownstones. His existence didn't fit the image the neighborhood prided itself on, a thriving, affluent hub where success was on display in every window and on every street corner. By now, the man had become a topic of heated discussion at the local coffee shops and neighborhood association meetings. Some residents expressed pity, but most saw him as a problem to be solved. "He's scaring customers away," said one shop owner at a meeting. "It's just not safe. We don't know where he came from or what he's capable of," chimed in a mother, clutching her toddler closer as though the man might suddenly materialize in the room. A plan was formed. A group of residents decided to confront the church, convinced that St. Augustine's was somehow enabling the man's continued presence. Early one morning, they gathered outside the gates. There were perhaps a dozen of them at first, their numbers quickly growing as curious onlookers joined the crowd. They carried an air of self-righteousness, emboldened by the belief that they were standing up for their community. Andrei heard the commotion from his small office at the back of the church. He set aside the homily he had been preparing for Sunday service and peered out a stained glass window to see what was happening. His heart sank at the sight of the crowd, their faces stern and voices loud, their fingers pointed accusingly at the man who sat quietly on the curb, his belongings gathered in a neat pile beside him. He didn't argue or defend himself. He simply looked at the ground, his hands clasped tightly as though praying for the earth to swallow him whole. Without hesitation, Andrei grabbed his coat and headed outside. The cold air hit him as he stepped through the church's heavy oak doors, but he didn't slow his stride. The crowd noticed him immediately, their voices rising as he approached. "Father Andre, this man needs to go!" one woman shouted, her tone sharp with impatience. "He's been here for weeks," another man added, arms crossed tightly over his chest. "This is a church, not a shelter. If he stays, more like him will come. And then what? Our neighborhood will turn into a slum." Andre raised his hands, signaling for quiet. His voice, though calm, carried an authority that cut through the noise. "Dear friends," he began, stepping between the crowd and the man, "I understand your concerns, and I hear your frustrations, but let us take a moment to consider this. The man you see before you is not a problem to be solved. He is a person, a soul just as valuable in God's eyes as any of us." The crowd murmured in response, some shaking their heads, others exchanging skeptical glances. Andre pressed on, his voice steady and unwavering. "Do any of us know his story? Do any of us know what brought him here, what struggles he has faced, or what pain he carries? We are quick to judge, but judgment is not ours to pass. If this man's presence has caused inconvenience, I will take responsibility for him. But I ask you, what does it say about us if we turn our backs on someone in need?" The crowd grew quieter, their earlier bravado replaced by a mixture of discomfort and unease. Andre could see the conflict in their faces. Some looked down, avoiding his gaze, while others seemed poised to argue further, but held back. Amid the silence, Andre turned to the man and extended a hand. The man hesitated, his eyes darting between Andre and the crowd. Slowly, he reached out and took Andre's hand, his grip weak but steady. Without a word, Andre helped him to his feet and led him toward the church doors. The murmurs resumed behind them as the crowd watched in disbelief. A few people whispered angrily, but no one stepped forward to stop them. Inside the church, Andre guided the man to a small room at the back of the building. It wasn't much, just a narrow space with a cot, a worn chair, and a small table. But it was warm and quiet. Andre set about preparing the room, pulling a blanket from a nearby cupboard and placing it on the cot. "I hope this will do for now," Andre said, glancing at the man, who stood awkwardly in the doorway, as though unsure whether he was truly welcome. "You're safe here. Take all the time you need." The man nodded, his eyes glistening with unspoken gratitude. He stepped inside, lowering himself onto the cot, as though it might vanish if he moved too quickly. Andre left briefly to fetch a tray of food, a bowl of steaming soup, a slice of bread, and a cup of tea. He placed it on the table and sat in the chair across from the man. For a while, they sat in silence. The man ate slowly, savoring each bite, as though it were his first meal in days. Andre watched him, waiting patiently for the man to speak first. Finally, the man set down his spoon and looked up. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice hoarse and barely above a whisper. "Because it's the right thing to do," Andre replied simply. "No one deserves to be treated the way you were out there." The man hesitated, then began to speak. His words came haltingly at first, but as he continued, the story unfolded, a tale of loss, betrayal, and circumstances beyond his control. He spoke of the family he had once had, the job he had lost, and the series of misfortunes that had led him to this point. Andre listened intently, his heart heavy with each word. He didn't interrupt or offer solutions. He simply gave the man the gift of being heard. "You're the first person who's treated me like I'm human in a long time," the man said at last, his voice trembling. "Thank you." Andre placed a reassuring hand on the man's shoulder. "You're not alone anymore." The wind howled outside St. Augustine's Church on that frigid December evening, rattling the old stained glass windows with each icy gust. Inside, Andre stood at the altar, his hands carefully arranging the candles for the evening prayer service. The sanctuary was quiet, save for the soft creak of the ancient wooden pews as the building settled into the stillness of the night. André found peace in these moments, alone with his thoughts and his faith. But that peace was abruptly interrupted by a series of firm knocks at the heavy oak doors of the church. André paused, frowning slightly. Visitors at this hour were unusual, and the urgent rhythm of the knocking suggested something out of the ordinary. Wiping his hands on his clerical robes, he made his way to the entrance. When he opened the door, the sight that greeted him was unexpected. A group of sharply dressed individuals stood on the steps, their expressions serious and professional. Their tailored coats and sleek leather gloves contrasted sharply with the humble simplicity of the church's stone facade. The leader of the group, a tall man with silver-streaked hair, stepped forward and extended a hand. "Good evening, Father André," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm Thomas Morgan from the mayor's office. May we come in?" André hesitated for only a moment before stepping aside and gesturing them in. "Of course. Please, come out of the cold." The group entered, their polished shoes clicking against the stone floor. Thomas wasted no time getting to the point. "We're here on behalf of the presidential campaign of Donald J. Trump," he began, his words measured. "Tomorrow morning, Mr. Trump will be visiting this church to deliver an important message to the community." André blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Donald Trump? Here? At St. Augustine's?" "Yes," Thomas confirmed. "We understand this is short notice, but Mr. Trump specifically requested this location. He has something significant he wishes to share, and he believes this church is the perfect setting." André's mind raced. St. Augustine's was far from the grandeur of the city's larger cathedrals. It was a modest, unassuming place of worship, nestled among the bustling streets, a refuge for the overlooked and the forgotten. Why would a man like Donald Trump, with his penchant for opulence, choose this humble sanctuary? "Still," André nodded. "We'll do whatever we can to accommodate. What do you need from us?" Thomas handed him a folder detailing the logistics for the event: security protocols, seating arrangements, media access. As André skimmed through the instructions, a wave of nervousness washed over him. This was no ordinary visit, it was a full-scale production. "We'll have a team arriving early tomorrow to handle setup," Thomas added. "Thank you for your cooperation, Father. It means a great deal." As the group departed into the cold night, André closed the door behind them and leaned against it, exhaling deeply. He glanced around the sanctuary, the weight of the task ahead sinking in. Why had St. Augustine's been chosen? What could Trump possibly want to say here? The questions swirled in his mind as he returned to his preparations, determined to meet the challenge with grace. By dawn, the quiet calm of the church had been replaced with a buzz of activity. Technicians set up microphones and lights, journalists arranged their cameras, and Secret Service agents conducted meticulous sweeps of the premises. The air was electric with anticipation. André moved among the crowd, ensuring everything was in order. His nerves simmered beneath the surface, but he maintained a composed exterior. Parishioners began to arrive, filling the pews with whispered speculation. Word had spread quickly, and even those who rarely set foot in the church came to see what the commotion was about. Among the attendees were some familiar faces, residents who had once complained about the homeless man outside the church. They now sat in the pews, their curiosity piqued. Was this event connected to him? They glanced around, searching for answers, but finding none. At exactly 10 a.m., a convoy of black SUVs pulled into the churchyard. The sight drew a collective murmur from the crowd, and every eye turned to the doors. As the vehicles came to a stop, a tall man stepped out, not Donald Trump, but one of his senior aides. The aide's demeanor was calm and authoritative as he shook hands with local officials before stepping to the podium. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice resonating through the sanctuary. "Mr. Trump, the presidential candidate and renowned businessman, has chosen this church for a very special reason. He has a message for this community, a message of profound importance. But first, I'd like to introduce the most important person in today's event. The room fell silent, the crowd holding its collective breath as the church doors creaked open. All heads turned as a figure stepped inside. It was the homeless man. He walked down the center aisle with steady, deliberate steps, his ragged clothes a stark contrast to the opulence of the event. Whispers rippled through the congregation, disbelief etched on every face. The same man they had ignored or dismissed now commanded their full attention. As he reached the stage, the man paused and turned to face the crowd. Slowly, he removed his tattered jacket, revealing a crisp, tailored suit underneath. He took off his sunglasses, his expression calm but resolute. A moment of stunned silence hung in the air before he spoke. "I am Donald Trump," he announced, his voice firm and clear. The sanctuary erupted in gasps and murmurs. Some people leaned forward, their eyes wide with shock, while others exchanged embarrassed glances. Those who had once dismissed him as a vagrant now found themselves grappling with the truth. "For weeks," Trump continued, "I lived disguised as a homeless man. I wanted to see firsthand how society treats those who have nothing." His gaze swept across the room, lingering briefly on Andre, who stood frozen in disbelief near the altar. "What I saw was heartbreaking," Trump said, his tone softening. "Too often, we turn away from those who need us most. We judge them, ignore them, and forget that they are people just like us." He gestured toward Andre. Only one person didn't turn away. Father Andre didn't ask who I was or what I had. He simply acted out of compassion. Trump descended from the stage and approached Andre, taking his hand and raising it high. "Andre has shown us what the world needs more of: compassion, generosity, and action without expectation. That's why I'm here today, not just to thank him, but to make a commitment to this community." The event was unforgettable. Those who had once complained about the homeless man now sat in silence, their faces flushed with guilt. Trump announced plans to fund a new community center near the church, dedicated to helping the homeless and underprivileged. He asked Andre to lead the project, ensuring it would become a beacon of hope. The story quickly spread, making headlines across the nation. News outlets praised Trump's bold experiment, but reserved their highest accolades for Andre's selflessness. The young curate became a symbol of the compassion the world so desperately needed. As the crowd dispersed that day, the sanctuary was filled not with whispers of judgment, but with the hum of inspiration. Andre, once an unassuming figure in a modest church, had become a hero, not through grand gestures but through quiet, unwavering kindness. The announcement of the new community center sent ripples through the city. Backed by Trump's funding and Andre's leadership, the project promised to bring hope to a neighborhood that had long been neglected, a place where the streets bore the weight of hardship and the air was thick with the silence of dreams deferred. For Andre, the excitement of the initial announcement was quickly tempered by the daunting reality of the task ahead. The neighborhood chosen for the center was one of the poorest in the city, a place where abandoned buildings stood as monuments to forgotten promises. Trash littered the sidewalks, businesses had long since closed their doors, and mistrust ran deep among the residents. It was a community fractured by years of struggle, where neighbors had learned to keep to themselves, and kindness was seen as a luxury few could afford. But Andre wasn't deterred. He had faced skepticism before, and his faith in the power of compassion remained unshaken. This wasn't just a building project, it was a chance to mend broken bonds and reignite a spark of hope. With a small team of volunteers, he began the painstaking process of turning the dream of the community center into a reality. From the very beginning, the challenges were overwhelming. The building they had secured was a crumbling relic of better days, its walls scarred with graffiti and its roof barely holding against the elements. The budget, though generous, seemed woefully insufficient once the costs of repairs, permits, and supplies began to add up. Andre quickly realized that this project would demand more than just money. It would require creativity, resourcefulness, and an unrelenting determination. And then there were the people. Andre knew that no community center could thrive without the trust and involvement of the very people it was meant to serve. Yet, when he first ventured into the neighborhood, he was met with wary eyes and closed doors. Families were hesitant to talk, and many dismissed the project as just another empty promise. "I've heard this all before," an elderly man said one day as Andre approached him on his porch. "Politicians come around, throw a little money at us, and then disappear. What makes you any different?" Andre didn't have an easy answer. Instead, he chose to listen. He spent hours walking the streets, knocking on doors, and sitting with anyone willing to talk. He asked about their struggles, their hopes, and what they needed most. Slowly, he began to understand the depth of the challenges they faced. Not just poverty, but a profound sense of abandonment. The first few months were grueling. The renovation of the building hit roadblock after roadblock. A contractor pulled out unexpectedly, citing the complexity of the repairs. A burst pipe flooded part of the site, setting the timeline back by weeks. And then there were the inevitable moments of doubt. Nights when Andre lay awake, questioning whether he was in over his head. "Maybe this is too big for me," he admitted one evening to a close friend who had volunteered to help with the project. The friend shook her head. "You've already done the hardest part, Andre. You've made people believe it's possible. Don't stop now." Andre took those words to heart. He prayed for guidance, leaned on his small but dedicated team, and kept moving forward, one step at a time. As the renovations continued, Andre turned his attention back to the people. He knew that for the center to succeed, it couldn't simply be a place where aid was handed out. It had to be a place where the community could come together. He started small. One Saturday morning, Andre organized a neighborhood cleanup. Armed with gloves, trash bags, and brooms, he and a handful of volunteers began clearing debris from the streets around the center. At first, most residents watched from their windows or doorsteps, skeptical and curious. But as the hours passed, a few began to join in. A young mother grabbed a broom and started sweeping the sidewalk in front of her building. A group of teenagers, initially mocking the effort, eventually picked up bags and began collecting trash. By the end of the day, the streets were noticeably cleaner, and a faint sense of pride had returned to the neighborhood. Encouraged by the success, Andre organized more initiatives, community potlucks, where neighbors brought what little they could to share, storytelling nights where people of all ages gathered to share their experiences, and workshops where residents brainstormed ideas for the center's programs. Bit by bit, the community began to take ownership of the project. The building itself slowly transformed. What had once been a derelict shell began to take on new life. Volunteers painted the walls with vibrant colors, replacing graffiti with murals that depicted the neighborhood's history and dreams. Broken windows were repaired, the leaky roof was patched, and furniture was donated by local businesses moved by Andre's vision. Inside, the space was divided into areas designed to meet the community's needs. A large room became a classroom for after-school programs and adult education courses. Another space was set aside for job training workshops, complete with donated computers. A small kitchen was built to host cooking classes and community meals. There was even a corner set up as a library, filled with books collected through a citywide donation drive. As the building came to life, so did the people. Andre noticed changes in the way they interacted with one another. Neighbors who had barely exchanged a word in years were now working side by side, sharing meals and laughter. Children played together in the newly cleaned streets, and parents began to talk about what the future could hold for their families. Months later, on the day of the center's grand opening, Andre stood in the doorway, watching as families filed in. The once empty halls were now filled with the sounds of laughter, conversation, and hope. Residents marveled at the transformation, their disbelief giving way to pride. Andre greeted each person with a warm smile, thanking them for their contributions. He knew that while Trump's funding had made the project possible, it was the people who had truly brought it to life. They had turned a building into a home, a place where kindness and connection flourished. One woman approached Andrei, her eyes brimming with tears. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "You've given us more than a building. You've given us hope." Andrei shook his head. "It wasn't me. It was all of us." As he looked around, Andrei felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey had been anything but easy, but it had been worth every challenge. The center wasn't just a testament to the power of compassion. It was a reminder that even in the face of hardship, people could come together to create something beautiful. In the months following the grand opening of the community center, Andrei's vision began to take root in ways even he couldn't have anticipated. What had started as a single building in a struggling neighborhood quickly grew into something much larger, a force of change that transcended its walls and began to transform lives on a profound scale. The center was no longer just a place to receive help. It was a haven of opportunity and renewal. Each day, the once dilapidated halls bustled with activity, filled with the energy of people reclaiming their dignity and rediscovering their potential. Andrei, whose quiet determination had sparked the project, became the heart of this transformation. Andrei's tireless efforts to understand the needs of the community paid off. He worked closely with families, listening to their stories, fears, and hopes. Through these conversations, Andrei shaped the programs offered at the center, ensuring they addressed the challenges faced by the neighborhood. One of the most impactful initiatives was the free meal program. The center's modest kitchen became a bustling hub, where volunteers prepared hot, nutritious meals every evening. Families who had once gone to bed hungry now gathered at long communal tables, sharing food and stories. It wasn't just about feeding bodies, it was about nourishing a sense of belonging and trust. Children who had struggled in school due to lack of resources found a sanctuary in the center's classroom. Andrei enlisted retired teachers and college students to tutor them, ensuring they not only caught up academically, but also gained the confidence to dream big. The sound of children laughing and learning filled the space, a stark contrast to the silence that had once hung over the neighborhood. For teenagers and young adults, the job training program offered a lifeline. Workshops on resume building, interview skills, and basic technology equipped them to enter the workforce with newfound confidence. Andrei partnered with local businesses to provide internships, creating a bridge between ambition and opportunity. The center also became a place for personal growth. Workshops on compassion and generosity encouraged residents to look beyond their own struggles and find ways to support each other. These sessions weren't just lectures, they were interactive experiences where people shared their challenges and learned how acts of kindness could ripple through their community. Andrei's humility and steadfast dedication earned him the respect of everyone who walked through the center's doors. To many, he wasn't just a leader, he was a friend, a mentor, and a guiding light. His ability to connect with people, to make them feel seen and valued, became the foundation of the center's success. One evening, during a community potluck hosted at the center, an elderly woman approached Andrei with tears in her eyes. She had lived in the neighborhood for decades, watching it fall into despair. Taking his hands in hers, she said, "You've given us more than a building, Andrei. You've given us back our humanity." Moments like these reminded Andrei why he had embarked on this journey. But he also knew that the success of the center couldn't rest on him alone. He began mentoring a team of volunteers, empowering them to take on leadership roles and ensuring the center's mission would endure long after he was gone. As word of the center's impact spread, people from neighboring communities began to take notice. Residents of similarly struggling neighborhoods visited the center, seeking advice on how to replicate its success. Andrei welcomed them with open arms, sharing the lessons he had learned and encouraging them to adapt the model to their unique needs. Behind the scenes, Donald Trump continued to quietly support Andrei's efforts. The funding he provided allowed Andrei to expand the center's reach, launching satellite programs in other parts of the city. These new initiatives ranged from mobile food banks to pop-up workshops on financial literacy. Trump's involvement wasn't heavily publicized. It was clear that he wanted the focus to remain on the work itself, not his role in it. André's work began to spark a broader movement. Local leaders and philanthropists, inspired by what they saw, started similar projects in their own communities. News outlets picked up the story, framing André as the unlikely hero who had shown the world the transformative power of compassion and grassroots action. The center's success wasn't just about the programs it offered, it was about the sense of unity it fostered. Neighbors who had once lived side by side without speaking now worked together to organize events, solve problems, and support each other in times of need. One particularly moving example came during a harsh winter when an elderly couple's heating system failed. Before André could even step in, a group of neighbors rallied to help. They pooled their resources to pay for repairs and brought the couple warm meals until their home was livable again. When André heard about it, he couldn't help but smile. The center wasn't just changing lives, it was changing hearts. The building itself began to take on a symbolic significance. Its brightly painted walls, adorned with murals created by local artists, stood as a beacon of hope amid the grey streets. One mural, painted near the entrance, depicted two hands clasped together beneath the words, "Together we rise." Residents often stopped to admire the mural, pointing it out to their children as a reminder of what the community had achieved. To them, the center wasn't just a place, it was a testament to the resilience and strength of the human spirit. Though André had already accomplished so much, he wasn't content to stop there. He began exploring ways to ensure the center's sustainability. He reached out to local universities, forming partnerships that allowed students to intern at the center while earning academic credit. He also worked with city officials to secure long-term funding, ensuring the programs could continue to grow. One evening, as André walked through the center's now vibrant halls, he overheard a conversation between two teenagers. One of them, a boy who had once struggled to stay in school, said, "You know, I think I want to be a teacher. I want to help kids the way they helped me here." André paused, his heart swelling with pride. In moments like this, he saw the true impact of the center, not just in the lives it touched directly, but in the ripple effects it created. Years later, at a grand celebration at the community center, André stood at the podium, gazing out at the crowd. Among them were faces of those he had helped, children who had become teachers, struggling individuals who had become community leaders. In that moment, André realized that his journey, born of a single act of kindness, had grown into something extraordinary. With a warm smile, André spoke. "There is no greater miracle than love and compassion. A small act by each of us can create profound change in the world." Seated in the front row, Donald Trump rose, clasped André's hand, and addressed the crowd. "André has taught us all an invaluable lesson. Always be ready to help others, not because they need it, but because it is the right thing to do." Standing under the starlit sky later that evening, André whispered to himself, "We can all make the world a better place, starting with love. Never fear to begin with something small. That's how the greatest miracles are made." To everyone, André left a heartfelt wish. Spread kindness, for when you give, you receive back tenfold. May you always be strong, loving, and willing to live fully for a better world. Dear friends, beloved children of this digital age, I come to you with a humble request, one inspired not by the need for glory, but by the mission to spread love, kindness, and community far and wide. In this vast and ever-connected world, even the smallest actions can plant the seeds of change. Yes, my friends, even a simple like or a follow can be a step toward building something extraordinary. For what is a like, if not a small act of acknowledgement, a way to say, "I see you, I value what you do"? And what is a follow, if not a promise to walk alongside someone on their journey, to learn, grow, and be inspired together? As the good book teaches us, The most profound miracles begin with the simplest of gestures. Just as a mustard seed grows into a mighty tree, so too can your click of a button grow into a movement of compassion and connection. When you choose to like, share, and follow, you become part of a greater mission, a mission to uplift, inspire, and remind others of the power of kindness. Imagine, if you will, a world where every act of goodness reaches the eyes and hearts of thousands, where messages of hope and unity rise above the noise, carried on the wings of your support. Each like you give is like a pebble dropped into still waters, creating ripples that travel far beyond what the eye can see. Each follow is a beacon of light, guiding others to a place where love and understanding reign. And so, dear friends, I ask you, will you join me on this journey? Will you take this moment, as small as it may seem, to click that like button, to follow this path of kindness, and to share this message with others? Together, we can build a community that transcends borders and barriers, one click at a time. Let us not underestimate the power of our collective actions, for as it is written, whatever you do for the least of these, you do for me. By supporting this message, you are not merely clicking a button, you are becoming a part of a family united by purpose and love. So let the Spirit move you. Press that like, tap that follow, share these words with those who need them most. And as you do, may you feel the joy of knowing you are part of something greater, a movement born of compassion, sustained by connection, and destined to shine like the stars in the heavens. Go forth, my friends, and may your clicks be plentiful, your follows sincere, and your shares a testament to the light you carry within you. For together, we can make the virtual world and the real one a better place. Amen to the likes. Hallelujah to the follows. Let us spread this message far and wide.